in 3 years. My husband Gerald had passed away from cancer, leaving me alone in our retirement cottage with nothing but memories and the modest pension we'd saved together during his 40 years as a high school principal. Cassandra showing up with what seemed like a real business plan, asking for help instead of just calling when she needed rent money, felt like a miracle. At 38, my daughter had never held a steady job longer than 18 months. She'd bounced from Seattle to Portland to Denver, always chasing the next big opportunity, the next chance to reinvent herself. I made my usual breakfast of oatmeal with fresh blueberries from the farmer's market in downtown Millbrook and sat at the kitchen table where Gerald and I had shared countless conversations about Cassandra's future. The $12,000 had come from our emergency fund, money we'd kept in a high-yield savings account for home repairs and unexpected medical expenses. Money I'd never touched, not even during Gerald's worst medical bills. Cassandra had been so professional about the whole thing. She'd outlined her business model, online wellness coaching with specialized certifications in trauma-informed yoga and nutritional counseling. She'd even shown me testimonials from successful coaches making 6 figures annually. The contract she'd prepared was detailed, professional, with a repayment schedule starting in 4 months and reasonable interest. Her signature had looked confident, purposeful. For the first time in years, I'd felt like my daughter was finally growing up. The first warning sign came exactly 1 week later. I was at Pemberton's pharmacy picking up my blood pressure medication when Dolores Pemberton herself approached me at the counter. Dolores had been the head pharmacist in Millbrook for 25 years and knew everyone's business, sometimes better than they knew it themselves. "Margaret," she said, lowering her voice and glancing around the small pharmacy, "I hope everything's okay with Cassandra." My stomach tightened. Why wouldn't it be? Well, she was in here yesterday, asking about selling medications. Said she had some prescriptions she wasn't using anymore and wondered if there was a market for them. Dolores adjusted her glasses nervously. Of course I explained that's illegal and dangerous, but she seemed genuinely surprised, like she really didn't know. I stared at Dolores, trying to process what she'd just told me. What kind of medications? She mentioned anxiety medications, sleep aids, pain relievers. "Margaret, I've seen this before. People get desperate for money and think they can make a quick buck selling pills. But it's a federal crime." I paid for my prescription with shaking hands and walked to my car in the Pemberton's parking lot, my mind racing. Why would Cassandra be asking about selling medications? She'd just received $12,000 for her business. Unless, that evening, I tried calling her. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. By 10 o'clock I was pacing my small living room, staring out at the lake where Gerald and I used to sit on the dock watching the sunset, trying to make sense of what Dolores had told me. Cassandra finally called back near midnight, her voice bright and energetic in a way that seemed forced. "Mom, sorry I missed your calls. I was at a networking event for entrepreneurs. You wouldn't believe the connections I'm making." "That's wonderful, honey," I said, settling into Gerald's old recliner. "Dolores Pemberton mentioned you stopped by the pharmacy yesterday." Silence, the kind of pause that makes your heart skip a beat. "Oh, that," she laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I was just curious about the pharmaceutical industry. Market research, you know. I'm thinking about incorporating some wellness supplements into my coaching practice." The lie hung between us like smoke. Dolores had been very specific about what Cassandra had asked, and it wasn't market research. Just be careful about any health claims, I said carefully. The FDA is strict about that kind of thing. Of course, Mom, I'm being super careful about everything. Love you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in the dark living room for a long time after that, listening to the lake water lap against the shore and the old cottage creak in the autumn wind. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The second red flag arrived 2 days later in the form of my neighbor, Evelyn Thornbury. Evelyn lives in the cottage next to mine, a retired librarian who'd moved to Willowbrook Lake the same year Gerald and I did. She's observant by nature and has become my closest friend since Gerald's passing. That Thursday morning, she knocked on my door holding a cup of coffee and wearing the expression she gets when she's about to share unpleasant news. "Margaret," she said, settling into the chair across from my kitchen table, "I need to tell you about something I saw yesterday." My chest tightened. "What kind of something?" "I was weeding my garden when I saw Cassandra leaving your cottage around noon. You'd left for your doctor's appointment, remember, but she had a key, so I thought maybe you'd asked her to pick something up." I nodded. Cassandra had kept a spare key since Gerald's funeral, in case of emergencies. "The thing is," Evelyn continued, "she was carrying 2 large bags. They looked heavy. And Margaret, she was crying, not just upset, but really crying, like her heart was breaking." I felt the blood drain from my face. Yesterday I'd been at my quarterly cardiology appointment, a routine visit that had lasted most of the afternoon. "What kind of bags?" "Black garbage bags, but they seemed to have hard objects in them. I could hear things clinking together when she put them in her car." I excused myself and walked through the cottage slowly, methodically. Everything looked normal at first glance, but as I moved from room to room, I began to notice subtle differences. The antique silver picture frames on the mantel were gone. The collection of vintage jewelry boxes Gerald had given me over the years, empty spaces on the bedroom dresser. In the spare room that served as Gerald's study, his vintage coin collection was missing from the desk drawer. Back in the living room I opened the cherry wood curio cabinet, where I displayed our most precious possessions, my grandmother's china, Gerald's father's pocket watch, the crystal vase we'd received as a wedding gift, all gone. Evelyn was still at the kitchen table when I returned, her face etched with sympathy. "She took things," I said quietly, "family heirlooms, Gerald's collections." Evelyn reached across and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Margaret, I'm so sorry." That afternoon I did something I'd never imagined I'd have to do. I called Detective Lisa Chen at the Millbrook Police Department. Lisa had investigated the break-in at the Hendersons' house last spring and had struck me as thorough and compassionate. "Mrs. Morrison," Detective Chen's voice was professional but kind when I explained the situation. "You're saying your daughter took these items without your permission?" "I never gave her permission to take anything except the business loan," I said, my voice barely steady. "Those things, they're all I have left of my husband, of my family history." "I understand. Would you like to file a theft report?" The word theft hit me like a physical blow. Filing a theft report against my own daughter felt like betraying everything Gerald and I had tried to build as parents. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Mrs. Morrison, if valuable items were taken without permission, that's theft regardless of family relationships. The law doesn't make exceptions for relatives." That evening I sat at Gerald's desk and made a list of everything that was missing. The pocket watch alone was worth $3,000. It had belonged to his grandfather, a railroad conductor in the 1920s. My grandmother's China service was irreplaceable. Together, everything Cassandra had taken was worth at least $8,000. I stared at the list until the numbers blurred through my tears. Then I picked up the phone and called her. "Mom." Her voice was cheerful, almost manic. "How are you feeling? I know your doctor's appointments always stress you out." "I'm fine," I said, not mentioning the missing items. "How's the business coming along?" "Oh my God, Mom, it's incredible, better than I ever dreamed. I'm thinking I might be able to pay you back early, maybe even with a bonus for believing in me." The words made my stomach turn. A bonus? She was talking about giving me extra money while sitting on thousands of dollars worth of my family heirlooms. That's very generous, but we agreed on the original terms. "I know, but Mom, this business is going to change everything. I want to take care of you the way you've always taken care of me." After we hung up, I sat in Gerald's study, surrounded by the empty spaces where his collections used to be. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and made 2 columns, the same way Gerald used to analyze problems when he was dealing with difficult students or school board issues. What I know on the left side: Cassandra borrowed $12,000 for a wellness business. She asked about selling medications illegally. She took family heirlooms worth $8,000 plus without permission. She lied about why she was at the pharmacy. She's talking about paying me back early with a bonus. What I need to find out on the right side: is there really a wellness business? What did she do with the stolen items? Where would she get money for an early payback with bonus? Why was she crying when she left with the stolen items? What else might she have taken that I haven't noticed? I stared at those 2 columns until my vision blurred. The picture they painted was devastating, but it was becoming clearer by the hour. The third warning sign came from the most unlikely source: my hairdresser. Brenda Maxwell has been cutting hair at Sheer Elegance in downtown Millbrook for 15 years. She's the kind of woman who remembers everyone's family history and keeps track of all the local gossip. During my regular appointment on Saturday morning, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Margaret, honey," she said while trimming around my ears, "I saw Cassandra at Goldstein's pawn shop on Thursday. She had some beautiful pieces with her. I thought maybe you were helping her sell some things to fund her new business." Goldstein's pawn shop, the only pawn shop in Millbrook, located in the older part of downtown where most people wouldn't venture unless they were desperate. "What kind of pieces?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, I couldn't see everything, but there was definitely some antique silver and what looked like a lovely china set. The owner, Mr. Goldstein, he's very particular about only taking quality pieces." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Did she seem upset?" "Oh yes, very emotional. She kept wiping her eyes while she was talking to Mr. Goldstein. Poor thing looked just heartbroken. When I left the hair salon, instead of driving home, I found myself pulling into the parking lot behind Goldstein's pawn shop. The building was old brick with barred windows and a neon sign that flickered between open and pawn. I'd never been inside a pawn shop before, but desperation makes you do things you never thought you would. The interior was cramped and dusty, with glass display cases lining the walls and a heavy-set man with kind eyes behind the counter. This had to be Mr. Goldstein. "Can I help you?" he asked, in a gravelly voice. "I'm Margaret Morrison. I think my daughter may have brought some items here this week." Cassandra Morrison. His expression immediately grew cautious. "I can't discuss specific transactions, ma'am. Privacy laws." "I understand, but those items belong to me. They were taken without my permission." Mr. Goldstein studied my face for a long moment, then walked to a filing cabinet behind the counter. He pulled out a folder and flipped through several papers. "Mrs. Morrison, if these items were indeed taken without permission, you'll need to file a police report. I require proper documentation for any disputed ownership claims. Can you at least tell me if the items are still here?" He shook his head sadly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Most of what she brought in was sold within 24 hours. Quality antique pieces move fast, but I kept copies of everything, as required by law. I left the pawn shop feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. My grandmother's china, Gerald's pocket watch, the silver picture frames that had held our wedding photos, all sold to strangers who would never know their history, their sentimental value." That evening, I called Detective Chen back. "I'd like to file that theft report," I said. "What changed your mind?" I looked around the cottage, Gerald, and I had filled with memories, now half empty and hollow. "She didn't just steal my possessions, she stole the last pieces I had of my husband, of my family history, and she's still lying to me about it. I can come by tomorrow morning to take your statement. Do you have photos of the missing items?" I did. Gerald had been meticulous about documenting our valuables for insurance purposes. Every piece of jewelry, every collectible coin, every piece of china, all photographed and catalogued in a thick binder he kept in his desk. "Mrs. Morrison," Detective Chen said gently, "I have to ask, are you prepared for where this might lead? Theft of items worth over $5,000 is a felony in this state." The word felony hung in the air like a death sentence. My daughter facing felony charges. But what was the alternative? Let her continue stealing from me while I pretended everything was normal. "I'm prepared," I said, though I wasn't sure I meant it. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the cottage, looking at all the empty spaces where my life used to be displayed. I thought about Cassandra as a little girl, bringing me dandelions from the yard and calling them sunshine flowers. I thought about her high school graduation, how proud Gerald and I had been. I thought about all the times we'd bailed her out of financial trouble, telling ourselves we were helping her get back on her feet. But this was different. This wasn't about rent money or car payments. This was about destroying the foundation of trust between us, about stealing the physical reminders of the love Gerald and I had built together. Around 3 in the morning, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table with the business contract Cassandra had given me. In the dim light from the small lamp, I noticed something I'd missed before. The date at the top of the contract was 2 days before she'd even asked me for the money. She'd planned this, all of it. I also noticed something else that made my stomach lurch. The contract was printed on letterhead from Serenity Wellness Coaching LLC, but when I looked closely at the fine print at the bottom, I could see it had been created using a free template from the internet. The company registration number was obviously fake, just a random string of digits. There was no business. There had never been a business. As the first light of dawn crept across Willowbrook Lake, I knew with absolute certainty that my daughter hadn't just borrowed $12,000 from me. She'd orchestrated an elaborate con to steal my money and my most precious possessions, and I was about to find out what her real gift to me had been all along. Detective Chen arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying a digital recorder and a manila folder thick with paperwork. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that somehow managed to be both professional and compassionate. "Mrs. Morrison, I want you to know this is going to be difficult," she said as we sat at my kitchen table. "Family theft cases are always complicated, emotionally and legally." I nodded, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug for warmth. "I understand. Let's start with the timeline. When did you first give your daughter money, and what was it supposedly for?" I told her everything. The wellness business story, the professional-looking contract, the $12,000 transfer. Then I moved on to the pharmacy incident, the missing heirlooms, and my visit to Goldstein's pawn shop. Detective Chen took notes steadily, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting specific details about the missing items' value and description. "The contract she showed you," she said. "Do you still have it?" I handed her the document. She examined it closely, particularly the fake letterhead and the pre-dated signature. "This shows premeditation," she said. "She planned this con before she ever approached you. The fake business registration, the pre-dated contract. This isn't an impulsive theft. This is fraud." The word fraud hit me almost as hard as theft had. My daughter wasn't just a thief, she was a con artist. "What happens now?" I asked. "I'll need you to provide a complete inventory of missing items with values and any proof of ownership, photos, receipts, insurance records. Then I'll get a warrant for the pawn shop records and start building the case." She paused, studying my face. "Mrs. Morrison, I have to ask, is there any chance your daughter is struggling with substance abuse? The pattern of behavior you're describing, lying, stealing from family, pawning valuables for quick cash, it's very common in addiction cases." The question hit me like a revelation. Cassandra's manic energy on the phone, her desperate crying when she left with the stolen items, her asking about selling prescription medications. How had I missed the signs? "I don't know," I admitted. "She's always been impulsive, but this level of deception, addiction changes people." Detective Chen said gently. "It makes them do things they would never do otherwise. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but it might explain it." After she left, I sat alone in my empty cottage and thought about all the phone calls over the years. Cassandra calling at odd hours, speaking too fast or too slow. The times she'd cancelled visits at the last minute, claiming to be sick. The dramatic weight fluctuations I'd attributed to her various fitness phases. How had I been so blind? But addiction or not, she'd stolen from me. She'd betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible, and she was still lying to me about it, still pretending she had a successful business that would allow her to pay me back with a bonus. That afternoon, my phone rang. Cassandra's name appeared on the caller ID, and for the first time in her adult life, I hesitated before answering. "Mom, hi. I have the most amazing news." Her voice was bright, almost euphoric. "I just signed my first 3 clients, high-paying long-term contracts. I'm going to be able to pay you back next month, instead of waiting 4 months like we planned." I closed my eyes, feeling sick. "That's wonderful, honey. And Mom, I want to give you a bonus, 24,000 instead of 12. You believed in me when nobody else would, and I want to show you how much that means to me. $24,000, double what she'd borrowed, supposedly from a business that had never existed, funded by the sale of my stolen family heirlooms. Cassandra, I said slowly, where exactly is this money coming from? From my coaching business, of course. Mom, you sound weird. Are you okay? I'm fine, just surprised by how quickly things are moving. Well, get used to it. Your daughter is finally going to be successful. I'll call you tomorrow with more details about the payback. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me sitting in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and the taste of betrayal in my mouth. That evening, Detective Chen called with an update. Mrs. Morrison, I spoke with Mr. Goldstein at the pawn shop. Your daughter sold approximately $8,000 worth of items on Thursday afternoon. He has detailed records, photos, and her identification on file. What did she get for them? About $3,000 in cash. Pawn shops typically pay 20 to 30% of actual value. $3,000 for $8,000 worth of irreplaceable family heirlooms. The math was as heartbreaking as the betrayal itself. There's something else, Detective Chen continued. I ran your daughter's name through our database. She's been arrested twice in the past year in Denver for possession of controlled substances. Both times, charges were dropped due to first offender programs, but it confirms what we suspected about substance abuse. I sank into Gerald's recliner, feeling like the world was tilting sideways. Drug arrests. My daughter had been arrested for drugs, and I'd never known. Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you absolutely certain you want to pursue criminal charges? Once I file this report, it becomes an active investigation. If we find sufficient evidence, your daughter will be arrested and charged with multiple felonies. I looked around the cottage, Gerald, and I had called home for 15 years. At the empty spaces where our memories used to live. At the financial record showing I trusted my daughter with money I couldn't afford to lose. Then I thought about her voice on the phone that afternoon, bright and manic, promising to pay me back double while sitting on the profits from selling my husband's pocket watch. Detective Chen, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. My daughter didn't just steal my money and possessions. She destroyed my trust, my sense of family, and my connection to my late husband's memory. If I don't hold her accountable now, she'll just do this to someone else. I understand. I'll file the report first thing Monday morning. That night, I opened Gerald's desk drawer and found the small digital recorder he'd used for school board meetings. I tested the battery, still half full. Then I slipped it into my purse, right where I'd be able to reach it easily. If Cassandra called again with more lies about her imaginary business success, I wanted every word documented, because I had a feeling this was just the beginning of a much larger deception, and I was determined to uncover every piece of the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. Through the bedroom window, I could see Cassandra's silver Honda Accord, the one I'd co-signed for 2 years ago when her credit was too poor to qualify for financing. She was here. I quickly grabbed the digital recorder from my purse and slipped it into the pocket of my robe, pressing the record button as I walked to the front door. This conversation was going to matter in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I opened the door to find Cassandra standing on my porch, holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen her, her clothes hanging loose, dark circles under her eyes, despite the makeup she'd applied to cover them. "Mom," she said, stepping forward to hug me, "I brought you flowers. I know how much you love having fresh flowers in the house." I accepted the hug stiffly, feeling the digital recorder in my pocket press against my ribs. "They're lovely. Come in." She followed me to the kitchen, chattering nervously about the drive from Denver, about how beautiful the lake looked in the morning light, about anything except why she was really here. I put the flowers in a vase while she sat at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming restlessly against the wood. "So," she said finally, "I have incredible news about the business." I sat across from her, my hands folded in my lap. "I'm listening." 3 major clients signed contracts this week, high-end executives who want comprehensive wellness coaching. The contracts are worth $18,000 each, Mom. $18,000. Her voice was getting higher, more animated. "I'm going to be able to pay you back next month with that bonus I mentioned. 24,000 instead of 12. I watched her face as she spoke, the slight twitch at the corner of her left eye, the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze, the rapid speech that seemed almost rehearsed. "That's wonderful," I said carefully. "What are the names of these companies?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What, the companies? The ones with the executives who hired you. What are they called?" "Oh, She looked toward the window, then back at me. "I can't really say. Confidentiality agreements, you know. These people value their privacy." "Of course." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Mom, I want you to be proud of me. For the first time in my life, I'm really succeeding at something. This business is going to change everything." The words hung between us like a challenge. I thought about the empty spaces in my curio cabinet, about Gerald's missing pocket watch, about the lies she'd been telling for weeks. "Cassandra," I said slowly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Her smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Last Thursday when I was at my doctor's appointment, did you come into the house?" The change in her expression was immediate. The brightness drained from her eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. "Thursday? I don't think so." "Why?" "Because my neighbor saw you leaving with 2 large bags." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still drumming against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller, less confident. "Oh, that? Yeah, I stopped by to borrow a few things. I was going to ask you first, but you weren't here, and I needed them for a client presentation." "What kind of things?" "Just some dishes and serving pieces, for a catering demonstration. I was going to bring them back this week." The lie was so effortless, so automatic, that it took my breath away. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd given birth to, raised, loved unconditionally, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "Cassandra," I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest, "I went to Goldstein's pawn shop." The color drained from her face completely. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again without saying anything. "I know you sold my grandmother's china, Gerald's pocket watch, the silver picture frames, all of it." She stared at me for several seconds, and I watched her calculate, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could still deny. "Mom, I can explain. Can you?" Can you explain why you stole $8,000 worth of family heirlooms and sold them for $3,000 in cash? Her composure cracked completely. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but whether they were from guilt or just from being caught, I couldn't tell. I was desperate, she whispered. I needed the money so badly, and I knew you wouldn't understand. Understand what? She took a shuddering breath. I owe some people money. Bad people. They were threatening me, Mom. I was scared. What kind of people? She looked down at her hands. Drug dealers. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though Detective Chen had already suggested the possibility. Hearing it confirmed by Cassandra herself was different. How much do you owe them? 15,000, maybe 20. I'm not sure anymore. The numbers made my head spin. She'd stolen my 12,000 plus gotten 3,000 from pawning my belongings, and she still owed more money than that. Cassandra, how long have you been using? She laughed bitterly. Using what? I'm not some street junkie, Mom. I made some bad investments, got in over my head. But even as she said it, I could see the truth in her face. The weight loss, the manic energy followed by crashes, the desperate need for money. The pieces all fit together now. What kind of drugs? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She was quiet for a long time, staring out at the lake. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Pills, mostly. Oxy, Adderall, whatever I could get. It started after my back injury 2 years ago. Remember, the doctor gave me pain pills, and they made everything feel manageable. When the prescription ran out, I found other ways to get them. I remembered the back injury. She'd fallen down some stairs at her apartment complex and had been in pain for weeks. I'd even driven up to Denver to take care of her for a few days. How much are you taking? Mom, please, it's not that bad. I just need to get these people off my back, and then I can get clean. That's why I needed the money. The recorder in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My daughter was sitting at my kitchen table, admitting to drug addiction and theft, and I was recording every word for the police. So there's no wellness business. She shook her head, fresh tears starting. I wanted there to be. I had all these plans, all these ideas, but I couldn't focus, couldn't get it together. Everything kept falling apart. And the contract you showed me, I made it on my computer. I thought if I could just get enough money to pay off my debts, I could start over. Get clean, build a real business, pay you back for real. I stared at her, this woman who had once been my little girl, and felt something break inside my chest. Not just my heart, but something deeper, the fundamental trust that binds a family together. Cassandra, do you understand what you've done to me? She looked up, confusion in her eyes. You didn't just steal my money. You stole the last pieces I had of your father, his pocket watch, the china from my grandmother that I was saving to pass down to you someday. You sold our family history for drug money. I know, and I'm sorry, but Mom, and you lied to me. For weeks you called me with these elaborate stories about your success, about paying me back with bonuses, while you were high on pills bought with money from pawning my wedding china. She was crying harder now, her whole body shaking. I'll get it back, I promise. I'll find a way to get everything back. How? With what money? You just told me you owe drug dealers $20,000. I don't know, but I'll figure it out. I always figure it out. But even as she said it, we both knew it was another lie. Cassandra had been figuring it out her entire adult life, and it had led her to this moment, sitting in my kitchen, admitting to fraud and theft, while withdrawing from whatever drugs she'd been taking. My phone buzzed, a text from Detective Chen. How did it go with your daughter? Any new information? I looked at Cassandra, still crying at my kitchen table, and made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. Cassandra, I need you to listen to me very carefully. She looked up, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I filed a police report yesterday. Detective Chen is building a case against you for theft and fraud. The blood drained from her face so completely, I thought she might faint. What? You stole from me. You committed fraud. There are consequences for those actions. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your daughter. Yes, you are, and that makes this even worse. You're going to have me arrested. I stood up too, facing her across the kitchen table, where we'd shared so many meals when she was growing up. You arrested yourself the moment you decided to steal from me instead of asking for help. I did ask for help. I asked for the loan. You asked for a loan based on a completely fictional business. That's not asking for help, Cassandra. That's fraud. She started pacing, running her hands through her hair. This is insane. You're going to destroy my life over some old dishes and jewelry. The casual dismissal of Gerald's pocket watch as old jewelry was the final straw. Get out, I said quietly. She stopped pacing. What? Get out of my house. Now, Mum, please, we can work this out. I'll go to rehab. I'll get clean. I'll find a way to pay you back everything. You should have thought about that before you pawned my husband's pocket watch for drug money. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw her expression shift from pleading to angry. Fine, she said, her voice cold, but don't expect me to forgive you for this. When I'm in prison, remember that you put me there. No, Cassandra, you put yourself there. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back. You know what's funny? I actually thought about getting clean before I came here. I thought maybe if I could make things right with you, I could make things right with myself, but you've made your choice. Yes, I have. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the silence. Then I took out my phone and texted Detective Chen back. She confessed to everything. I have it recorded. When can we meet? The response came within minutes. I can be there in an hour, Mrs. Morrison. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I wasn't sorry. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe clearly. The truth was finally out in the open, painful as it was. Detective Chen arrived exactly an hour later, bringing another officer with her, a young man named Officer Rodriguez, who operated the department's recording equipment. Mrs. Morrison, before we listen to this recording, I want you to understand what you're doing, Detective Chen said as we sat in my living room. This conversation will likely be the primary evidence in our case against your daughter. I nodded. I understand. Once we have her confession on record, we'll issue a warrant for her arrest. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Cassandra's words as she left. When I'm in prison, remember that you put me there. Detective Chen, I said, my daughter is addicted to drugs. She's stolen from me, lied to me, and destroyed precious family heirlooms for money to buy pills. If I don't hold her accountable now, she'll just continue on this path until she's dead, or she destroys someone else's life. I understand. Let's hear the recording. Officer Rodriguez set up his equipment while I connected my small recorder. For the next 45 minutes, we listened to Cassandra's voice admitting to the theft, the fake business, the drug addiction, and the debts to dealers. Her words filled my living room, each confession another nail in the case against her. When it was over, Detective Chen turned off the equipment and looked at me with sympathy. This is more than enough for multiple felony charges. Theft over $5,000, fraud, identity theft for the fake business registration. She's looking at serious prison time. How much time? With her prior drug arrests in Denver, probably 3 to 5 years if she pleads guilty. More if she goes to trial and loses. 3 to 5 years. My daughter would be in prison for 3 to 5 years because of choices she'd made, lies she'd told, things she'd stolen from me. There's one more thing, Detective Chen said. We'll need to know if you want to pursue restitution. What does that mean? It means the court can order her to pay you back the money she stole, plus damages. But Mrs. Morrison, I have to be honest, most addicts don't have the means to pay significant restitution. It's more symbolic than practical. I thought about Gerald's pocket watch, probably already sold to some collector who would never know it had belonged to a railroad conductor who'd worked his whole life to provide for his family. I want restitution for the full amount. The $12,000 in cash, plus the $8,000 in stolen items. That's $20,000. Yes, she'll probably never be able to pay it. Then she'll spend the rest of her life being reminded of what she took from me. Detective Chen nodded. I'll include it in the charges. Mrs. Morrison, we'll issue the warrant tomorrow morning. She'll likely be arrested within 24 hours. After they left, I called my sister Patricia in Phoenix. Patricia is 2 years older than me and has been my closest confidant since Gerald died. Margaret, you sound terrible. What's wrong? I told her everything. The loan, the theft, the drugs, the recording, the pending arrest. Patricia listened without interrupting, the way she had when we were children, and I'd come to her with problems. Oh honey, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry. Did I do the right thing? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Margaret, do you remember when Cassandra was 16 and she stole money from your purse to buy concert tickets? I did remember. $40 missing from my wallet, Cassandra claiming she didn't know anything about it until I found the ticket stub in her jeans pocket. Gerald wanted to let it slide, but you made her return the tickets and work off the money doing chores around the house. She hated me for a month. But she never stole from you again, until now. This is different, Patricia. This isn't $40 for concert tickets, this is $20,000 and drug addiction, which is exactly why you can't let it slide this time. Margaret, if you don't hold her accountable now, what's to stop her from doing this again? To you or to someone else who trusts her? Patricia was right. But that didn't make it hurt less. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Cassandra as a little girl, how she'd curl up in my lap when she was scared, how she'd bring me pictures she'd drawn at school, how proud she'd been when she learned to ride her bike. At what point had that little girl become a woman who could look me in the eye and lie about stealing my wedding china? The next morning, Detective Chen called at 8 o'clock. Mrs. Morrison, we issued the warrant an hour ago. Officers are on their way to your daughter's apartment in Denver now. My hands started shaking. Will she go to jail immediately? She'll be booked and held pending arraignment. Depending on the judge and her criminal history, she might be released on bail, or she might be held until trial. What if she runs? We flagged her car and her driver's license. If she tries to leave the state, she'll be caught. 2 hours later, Detective Chen called again. We have her in custody. She was arrested at her apartment without incident. Mrs. Morrison, she asked if she could call you. The thought of talking to Cassandra while she was sitting in a jail cell made my stomach turn. I don't think I'm ready for that. I understand. She'll have the right to make other calls. Is there anyone else she might reach out to? Maybe my sister Patricia, but they're not close. Cassandra doesn't really have many people in her life, which was another tragedy in itself. My daughter had burned so many bridges, told so many lies, that she had isolated herself from everyone who might have helped her. Mrs. Morrison, there's something else. We searched her apartment with the warrant. We found a significant amount of drugs, pills mostly, and evidence that she's been dealing as well as using. Dealing. The word hit me like a punch to the stomach. What kind of evidence? Scales, baggies, a notebook with names and dollar amounts. It looks like she's been selling pills to pay for her own habit and to try to pay down her debt to her suppliers. So not only was Cassandra addicted to drugs, she was also selling them, probably to other people's children, other people's family members. How much more trouble is she in? A lot. Drug dealing carries much stiffer penalties than theft. She's looking at a minimum of 5 years, possibly 10 or more. I sank into Gerald's recliner, feeling like the world had tilted sideways. My daughter wasn't just a thief, she was a drug dealer facing a decade in prison. Detective Chen, I need to ask you something. Of course. Is there any chance she could get help instead of just punishment? Rehab, counseling, something that might actually address the addiction. There are drug court programs that combine treatment with probation, but given the dealing charges, she'd have to plead guilty to everything and show genuine remorse. Even then it's not guaranteed. That afternoon, I received a call I'd been dreading. It was from the county jail. This is a collect call from Cassandra Morrison. Will you accept the charges? I stared at the phone for a long moment, then pressed the button to accept. Mom, her voice was small, scared, nothing like the manic energy she'd had in my kitchen the day before. I'm here. They're saying I might go to prison for 10 years. I know. Mom, please. You have to drop the charges. I'll go to rehab. I'll get clean. I'll find a way to pay you back. Please don't let them destroy my life. I closed my eyes. Cassandra, you destroyed your own life. The drugs, the theft, the dealing, those were your choices. I know, but everyone makes mistakes. This doesn't have to ruin everything. This isn't a mistake. Forgetting to call me on my birthday is a mistake. Stealing $20,000 and selling drugs is a pattern of criminal behavior. She was crying now. You're my mother. You're supposed to love me no matter what. I do love you. That's exactly why I can't drop these charges. That doesn't make any sense. Cassandra, if I drop these charges, what happens? You go back to Denver, back to the same dealers, the same drugs, the same lies. How long before you overdose? How long before you steal from someone else who can't afford to lose what you take? I'll get clean. I promise. You promised me you had a real business. You promised me you were borrowing the money for legitimate purposes. You promised me you were doing well. Why should I believe this promise? The line was quiet, except for her crying. Because I don't want to die, she said finally, and that's where this is heading if nothing changes. Those words, "I don't want to die," broke something loose in my chest. Despite everything she'd done, she was still my daughter. She was still the little girl who used to bring me dandelions and call them sunshine flowers. "Cassandra, I can't drop the charges, but I can make sure your lawyer knows you're willing to enter a treatment program." "You mean like drug court?" "I mean whatever program gives you the best chance of getting clean and staying clean. But you have to want it. Really want it. Not just because you're facing prison time, but because you want to live." "I do want it. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know I've destroyed everything, but I want to try to fix it." For the first time in our conversation, she sounded genuinely remorseful rather than just desperate. "Then fight for a treatment program. Work with your lawyer. Show the judge that you understand what you've done and that you're committed to changing. Will you write a letter to the judge, asking for treatment instead of prison?" I thought about Gerald's pocket watch, about my grandmother's china, about the weeks of lies and manipulation. "I'll write a letter," I said finally, "but I'm going to tell the truth in it. About what you stole, about how it made me feel, and about why I think you need professional help more than you need punishment." "Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. Cassandra, I want you to understand something. Even if you get into a treatment program, even if you get clean, our relationship may never be the same. Trust, once broken, is very hard to rebuild." "I know, but I want to try." "Then try, but understand that trying means more than just getting clean. It means taking full responsibility for what you've done, making amends where possible, and proving through your actions, not your words, that you've changed." 6 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom, watching my daughter plead guilty to multiple felony charges. She looked different, cleaner, more alert, after 6 weeks of forced sobriety in jail. Her public defender had worked out a plea agreement, 3 years in a residential treatment facility, followed by 5 years of probation, in exchange for pleading guilty to all charges. The judge, an older woman with kind but stern eyes, read my letter aloud before sentencing. In it, I'd described the theft, the lies, the destroyed family heirlooms, but I'd also described the daughter I remembered, the one who might still exist underneath the addiction. "Morrison," the judge said, looking directly at me in the gallery, "your letter demonstrates remarkable wisdom and compassion. Your daughter is fortunate to have a mother who loves her enough to hold her accountable while still advocating for her rehabilitation." Then she turned to Cassandra. "Morrison, you have been given an extraordinary opportunity. Your mother could have pressed for the maximum sentence, and frankly your crimes warrant serious prison time. Instead, she has advocated for treatment while refusing to enable your destructive behavior." Cassandra nodded, tears streaming down her face. "If you violate the terms of this agreement in any way, if you use drugs, if you leave treatment without permission, if you commit any crime, you will serve the full 10-year sentence. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then I sentence you to 3 years residential treatment, followed by 5 years supervised probation, with restitution of $20,000 to be paid during probation." After the hearing, Cassandra was allowed a few minutes to speak with me before being transported to the treatment facility. "Mom," she said, her voice steady for the first time in months, "I know I have no right to ask this, but will you visit me? I looked at my daughter, thinner, paler, but with clearer eyes than I'd seen in years. I'll visit, I said, but Cassandra, understand that rebuilding our relationship will be a long process. Trust has to be earned back, step by step. I understand. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me, but also for not letting me give up on myself. I hugged her then, and for just a moment, she felt like my little girl again. That evening, I sat on my dock watching the sunset over Millbrook Lake. The cottage felt different now, emptier in some ways, but also cleaner, like a fever had finally broken. I'd never get Gerald's pocket watch back, never see my grandmother's china on my table again. Those pieces of my family's history were gone forever, but maybe, just maybe, I'd helped save the most important piece, my daughter's life. My phone rang. Patricia, checking in as she had every evening since Cassandra's arrest. How are you holding up? She asked. I watched a family of ducks glide across the water, their wake spreading in perfect V-shapes behind them. I'm okay, I said, and for the first time in months I meant it. It's going to be a long road, but I think we're finally heading in the right direction. You did the right thing, Margaret. I hope so. I guess we'll find out. 3 years. That's how long Cassandra would be in treatment. How long I'd have to wait to see if my daughter could truly change. If she could become the person I'd always hoped she could be. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I had something I'd been missing. Hope, real hope, built on truth instead of lies, on accountability instead of enablement. And that, I realized, was the real gift my daughter had given me, not through her theft and deception, but through finally accepting responsibility for her actions. It wasn't the gift either of us had expected, but it might just be the one that saved us both.